This is the third program in our series of the Chicago Architecture Biennial Partner Program. And we've been so lucky to be able to feature a French architect or French architect who also live in Chicago doing things like the Good City Group. We had Philippe Stanfield-Pinel from BOA is with us tonight. Where are you, Philippe? Ah, c'est le grand derrière là-bas. It was such a nice evening with panelists, with films. It's a real forum of ideas for us. And we're redoing the same thing tonight. And it's a very special day, right? We will be talking about architecture, of course, but also senses and memory. And of course, this is the 11th of November. We are not at the 11th hour, but this is still Veteran Day. It's a great day to remember and to say how does architecture speak to memory. So with us to do that tonight, we feature a panel, but also coming straight from France. On the day we open the frontier, or just about, we will have with us Thomas Coldefy and Zoltan Neville from Coldefy, based in Lille, France. A bit more, but not too much from me until I come back. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Consul of France in Chicago, Yannick Tagan, just before we show a 7-minute video that will give a bit of context to the theme of memory today. Please, Yannick. Merci.
So I understand that when you give some remarks, you're allowed to take this out for a couple of minutes. So I will make the best use of this privilege. Good evening to everyone. So I'm Yannick Tagan, the new French Consul General here in Chicago. And I'm very glad to be here tonight with you for conversations, which sounds to me very, very promising. And I want to thank all the panelists, Thomas Coldefy from Paris, Obama Foundation, Clayco, and University of Illinois for making the time to be with us tonight. I'm glad to be here because this series of conversations organized by the Alliance Française on the occasions of this Chicago Architecture Biennial are thrilling in many respects. First of all, they mark the resumption, if I'm correct, of in-person activities at some point here at the Alliance. And I'd like to see in these events maybe a sign that we're closer and closer to a kind of normalcy, even if the news coming from Europe these days are not that good. They're thrilling as well because they contribute to our broader efforts and the broader efforts of the cultural services here in Chicago to trigger an in-depth and a multi-layer conversation between Chicago and France about architecture and urban planning. As you know, these two fields are at the core of the action of our cultural services here, be it through Night of Ideas, the upcoming Night of Ideas, and through this new program, which is branded Villa Albertine, that you will be hear about very soon, I guess. I'm glad as well to be here tonight because, as Amy said, this is the 11th of November. This is Remembrance Day. This is Veterans Day here in the US. And I'm very happy to attend this conversation with actors involved in projects which linked very much architecture and remembrance. The 11th of November means a lot in France, in the US. It's a piece of our history which is enshrined in the history of many families in the US and in France. So very happy to have you, Mr. Coldefy, with us, and very happy to have you from the Obama Foundation with us tonight to talk about architecture and memory. Have a very nice evening.
Sont passés de mode, on défait encore dans l'eau potable, et écrasés par les 45 degrés à l'ombre, vous arrivez devant le mémorial du Covid-19. À votre avis, à quoi est-ce qu'il ressemble? Est-ce un monument aux morts sur une place publique? La reconstitution d'un hôpital de 2020? Un musée, une œuvre d'art symbolisant la petitesse de l'homme face au virus? On va parler aujourd'hui d'architecture mémorielle et vous risquez d'être surpris. L'architecture mémorielle a pour noble but de transmettre la mémoire du passé. Mais quand on y réfléchit un peu, ça représente un vrai défi. Comment faire pour traduire dans l'espace et pour rendre tangible cette mémoire qui par définition est immatérielle et subjective? Alors au fil des siècles, on a testé plusieurs options. On a érigé en Europe des églises et des colonnes de peste en mémoire des épidémies, mais davantage pour honorer Dieu que pour se souvenir des défunts. Ensuite, on a construit en série des monuments aux morts, notamment après la Première Guerre mondiale, dans 36 000 communes françaises, et en partie pour exalter le patriotisme. Et puis, on a opté pour des mémoriaux imposants, comme le ex-mémorial de Chicago. Mais aujourd'hui, les références religieuses et la monumentalité ont laissé place à des lieux plus sobres, dont le but est de transmettre la mémoire par des sensations et des émotions universelles. On mise pour ça sur une architecture sensible et sensorielle, et concrètement, ça donne ça. Une ambiance sonore permettant de s'immerger dans le quotidien des esclaves, un jeu sur la matière, avec des briques transparentes remplies d'affaires ayant appartenu aux victimes de violences armées, ou une surface qui porte le nom des défunts et dans laquelle les visiteurs voient leur reflet. On peut citer aussi le jeu sur les volumes. Au musée juif de Berlin, on marche dans une pièce oppressante et étroite sur des visages de métal qui s'entrechoquent et résonnent dans la pièce. Et puis, certains lieux de mémoire sont d'ailleurs pensés pour susciter l'émotion grâce à la déambulation. Et beaucoup sont désormais ouverts sur la ville. Le mémorial du 11 septembre est une place publique au cœur de New York. Le mémorial juif de Berlin est un espace sans limite définie qui semble s'étendre à la ville entière. Et le mémorial Pulse nous proposera d'emprunter le chemin effectué par les rescapés de la fusillade d'Orlando entre la boîte de nuit, le lieu du drame, et l'hôpital de la ville. On fait donc entrer la mémoire dans l'espace public et dans le paysage quotidien, ce qui ne fait que renforcer les fonctions multiples et parfois insoupçonnées de l'architecture du souvenir. Le lieu de mémoire a d'abord une fonction quasi thérapeutique. En conservant une trace du passé, il nous décharge du poids de la mémoire et en représentant physiquement l'absence, il permet à une communauté de faire son deuil et de se rassembler autour d'une douleur et d'un passé commun. Le mémorial est aussi un outil politique. Il permet d'acter officiellement la reconnaissance d'une cause ou d'un événement ou de souder la population autour du culte de la patrie. Mais un lieu de mémoire est aussi tourné vers l'avenir. Il permet d'éviter l'oubli, d'interroger, de sensibiliser à une cause et d'empêcher que les drames passés se reproduisent. Par exemple, on peut dire que le mémorial de l'ouragan Katrina, qui rappelle l'ampleur des catastrophes naturelles, permet d'entretenir une culture du risque devenue nécessaire face au changement climatique. La visite de lieux de mémoire est aussi une opportunité économique, mais elle pose aussi des questions éthiques. N'est-il pas malsain de visiter des camps de concentration comme on fréquente un parc d'attractions ou de prendre un selfie à Tchernobyl, #greenporn, #OMG so creepy? Le tourisme de masse à Auschwitz permet-il de faire connaître la Shoah au plus grand nombre ou dépossède-t-il le lieu de sa force mémorielle? Cette question n'est qu'une des très nombreuses interrogations liées à l'architecture mémorielle. Car oui, comme vous devant la page d'accueil Netflix, l'architecte qui veut transmettre la mémoire doit faire des choix. Mais lui doit se poser des questions aussi complexes que stimulantes. Première question, quel équilibre entre explication et émotion? D'un côté, l'explication est souvent nécessaire pour éviter l'oubli et les malentendus, mais de l'autre, elle peut banaliser le choc émotionnel. Dommage, car l'émotion permet de s'approprier les faits, provoque une réflexion personnelle sur le passé et transmet un message de manière inconsciente. Il faut donc trouver un compromis entre émotion et explication. Au village d'Oradour-sur-Glane, dont la population fut massacrée par des soldats allemands le 10 juin 1944, une visite pédagogique permet de comprendre les événements, mais elle est suivie d'un parcours dans les ruines du village dévasté qui ajoute une dimension sensible à l'expérience intellectuelle. Mais restons à Oradour. Ce village a volontairement été figé dans le passé. En revanche, à Drancy, ancien camp d'internement, on a construit des logements sociaux encore habités. Alors, peut-on faire cohabiter passé et présent? Un mémorial doit-il être sacralisé ou rester un lieu de vie? Voir des enfants jouer sur les dalles du mémorial de l'Holocauste à Berlin, est-ce un obstacle au travail de mémoire? Et d'ailleurs, faut-il forcément conserver les traces du passé? Est-ce que la vie et l'avenir ne pourraient pas prendre le dessus? À Toulouse, par exemple, après l'explosion de l'usine AZF, on efface toute trace de l'usine pour construire à la place un centre de recherche sur le cancer. Mais il y a peut-être un juste milieu à trouver entre muséifier ou effacer toute trace du passé. Par exemple, ne pas conserver toutes les traces du passé, mais l'évoquer par des symboles. Ou alors, mêler en un même lieu passé et avenir. Le Obama Center de Chicago, par exemple, comportera un musée, des archives et une bibliothèque, mais aussi potager, salles de classe et places publiques, des lieux de vie tournés vers l'avenir, pensés pour revitaliser le quartier du Southside. Cet équilibre entre passé et avenir, on y pense peu, mais il est aussi à trouver au cœur même des villes. Car la mémoire du passé, elle s'incarne aussi dans des lieux qui peuvent paraître banals ou dégradés. Le bidonville de Nanterre, témoin d'un pan de l'histoire migratoire française, ou la Kowloon Walled City à Hong Kong, quartier le plus dense au monde, connu pour son dédale de rues et ses repères de mafieux. Des lieux que j'aurais aimé visiter, mais qui ont été détruits au nom de la modernisation de la ville. Alors aujourd'hui, faire de l'architecture mémorielle, c'est aussi réhabiliter, faire évoluer l'espace urbain, mais sans détruire ces lieux porteurs d'une histoire et d'une mémoire collective qui ont forgé l'imaginaire et l'identité de la ville. Mais on peut quand même se demander si toute trace du passé mérite d'être conservée. Pour certains, les monuments ou statues liés au passé colonial ou esclavagiste nous renseignent sur notre histoire. Il faut donc les préserver en les contextualisant grâce à des plaques explicatives pour apprendre d'un passé qu'il serait dangereux d'oublier. Pour d'autres, au contraire, ces monuments n'ont pas leur place dans l'espace public, car leur présence même signale que le passé raciste qu'ils représentent est digne d'être célébré. Alors, puisque contrairement à l'histoire, la mémoire est un choix, choisissons de bâtir des lieux qui reflètent d'autres idéologies et d'autres facettes de l'histoire. Un débat qui rappelle que le regard porté sur les faits évolue avec le temps et qui pose question. Les mémoriaux qu'on construit aujourd'hui ne seront-ils pas perçus dans quelques siècles comme des reflets honteux d'une société sexiste, responsable d'une catastrophe écologique? Bref, l'architecture n'est pas qu'une affaire de cosinus et d'angle droit. Parce qu'elle traduit l'immatériel et suscite des émotions, elle préserve le passé, modèle le présent et façonne l'avenir. Reste à savoir lequel, on a les cartes en main.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Nicolas Doué. I work at the French Embassy as a Deputy Director of the Villa Albertine here in Chicago with Axel Moller, who is the director. So I'm delighted to be here at the Alliance Française tonight. So a big thank you to all the team. Thank you, Aimé. It's a great pleasure to work with you as usual. So tonight is our third City Cité conference dedicated to the French participation to the Chicago Architecture Biennial. And as mentioned earlier by Yannick, the French Consul, we will talk about Veterans Day and also about architecture. So it's a unique opportunity to discuss the place of memory in cities and architecture. So memory can be painful, but also happy. But it's part of the way we live on this planet as sensitive people. So for this panel, we are pleased to welcome Thomas Coldefy and Zoltan Neville from the Coldefy agency. So we are very honored to have you here tonight because you are doing the biggest project made by a French architectural firm in the US with the Orlando Memorial, in addition, of course, to the very fantastic project in Lille, Paris, Hong Kong, or Shenzhen. We are also very honored to have the presence of the Obama Foundation with the Vice President for Civic Engagement, so Michael Strotmanis. So you have a long history of collaboration with Barack Obama, and you are one of the key players of the realization of the center that is being under construction in the south side of Chicago. Welcome also to Leslie Roth from Clayco. So you work as a principal for Lamar Johnson Collaborative, and you are appointed to the new Committee on Design for the City of Chicago. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the financial support by Clayco. And last but not least, we have Professor Teresa Cordova, professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and also a director of the Great Cities Institute. So let's start with Thomas and Zoltan. Thank you. So
Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Coldefy. I'm an architect working in France and abroad. I'm here with Zoltan, very happy to share our experience and our work in Orlando in this very special day. So tonight we'd like to talk about this project that we are designing, which is a national post memorial and museum in Orlando, Florida. The phrase that you see on this slide is very important because basically it all started from there. You have to recall what happened actually in 2016. There was a terror attack in Orlando that took place in a nightclub in south of downtown Orlando. This event was a tragedy that touched an amount of different communities because the nightclub was a LGBT nightclub, but it started to raise some awareness of a problem that is occurring into our society. And then on the day after this event happened, the foundation One Pulse was created and decided with a very strong motto to fight this and write this sentence, which is here: "We will not let hate win." This was the beginning of a journey to fight hate, to fight intolerance, and our practice was really attracted by this bid that was launched internationally. Our practice answered to a call in order to create what was supposed to be, what will be a national memorial and a museum. There was 68 applicants, and our studio was selected to define what will be the project we're going to show tonight. So, as said, on the day after the event, the entire community of Orlando took place and gathered in order to define, to get together and to support each other in order to fight what happened, and it raised also, as I was saying, some true collective awareness about solidarity. This was a light show that was used in Paris as an example, but I think in all over the world, people raised and decided to support what happened. So our story as architects began in a very particular way because it is really not a typical relationship of a client to an architect who is coming to ask what are we going to build. It started with a very collaborative design strategy where the architect is really part of a process among the different communities in order to define all together what can we do or what can we define with the basis of a project that is not really was not really dictated by a command of new spaces or new infrastructure, but how to heal the pain, how to commemorate, how to keep the memory, but also how to bring new values to bring positiveness and optimism into the city of Orlando, but to send a message also to our future generation. So I have just a very small video also showing, highlighting how we work at the studio.
We really believe that the experience of spaces and places is not only coming from the architect, it's really coming from debate, exchange. So actually that's exactly the way we want to work, and we work actually for the Pulse project. We have gathered around us a team of experts, of people coming from different fields.
So let's show you how we do that in Paris for Pulse.
So I'm Pierre. I am from Duxeno. We are the scenographer in the project.
Hello, my name is Xavier Veillant and I'm an artist based in Paris.
Hello, my name is Ana Colmenero. I'm from Spain. I work at Agence.
Hello, we are AFDI team, and we are very happy and proud to participate as a member of a more global team on that fantastic project.
All kind of fields, when they come together with us, this is really something we enjoy, actually, and that's something we couldn't do differently because that's who we are.
That's it. So just to show you a little bit of the way we approach the project is really about bringing together different expertise, different fields, in order to think what should be the right and the appropriate and very delicate answer. On this image, as you can see, the project started not with a programmatic demand of new spaces, but really about how can we use values of love, hope, unity, acceptance, courage, and strength to define this strategy for the city. The true start of the project is also about creating three. There are actually three parts in the project. One is the starting point of the project is where the attack took place, which is here in the south of downtown of Orlando, where the nightclub is. We decided to use the second element of the program, which was a museum, and the third one, which is also a promenade or a walk through the city to connect to the different existing park and existing promenade in the city, to create a to create something that works together. So we started to call actually the nightclub being as the source, the transmitter, the generator, the place where it happened, and what are we going to do from that to transmit something, which is happening then in the second part of the project in the museum that you see here, that we call the receiver. It has to transmit new message, new ways to communicate about acceptance and sharing into a different process. And the third one is a layer of urbanism, which is the Orlando Health Survival Walk, that will be a promenade that is connecting the different components of the project. How did we approach that? We approached it with three themes, what we call the unifying threads of the projects: water, greenery, and color. Why water? Because for us, water is the source of life. It is a way also to detach from a very concrete aspect of those values. Greenery because from water grows greenery. It's a source of growth and a source of energy. And the third one is the color. We decided to work with the French artist Xavier Veillant to define a strategy of 49 colors in memory of the 49 victims, and work with that to give some insight throughout the project. Here on this slide, you see how we started to implement that at the scale of the city, in order that it is also addressing the layer also of connecting with the evolution of this district in South Downtown, that will be connected with new elements of landscape and activation by the project. So, as I was saying, it all started with the one pulse, the Pulse Club. So for us, it becomes one big echo in the city where everything will resonate. And how did we want to work with this building? Actually, the nightclub that was attacked. It's actually a quite normal building, almost like a non-architecture. It's a very small piece in the city, but the community really wanted to keep it. It was a given for us. So the first action we decided is to use water to create a pond around it, to start to ease the drama of this space and to sanctuarize the space. Second one is that we introduce a color into this pond in order to bring the different parties, communities, people together, unified together around it. And the third aspect of the memorial is that we wanted not to touch it, but create a passage through, opening the memorial to light in order to make it breathe again, to create a walk-through while we don't want to get in. You will see on the next slide. So in the end, what we proposed is almost like a new place, a new safe place for Orlando, which is a garden where in the middle of it you have a kind of a pavilion that is living there with a lot of new possibilities. So we decided to plant 49 trees, also working with our landscape architect, in order to commemorate and to give new life to the site. And then we decided also to create a gathering, embracing movement, which you can see on this sketch, which is connecting people together. So in the end, the site of the memorial is a place of a garden with different elements coming together with a lot of freedom, actually. As you can see on this picture, we will have this garden will be widely planted with 49 trees happening around. We've decided to seal the name of the victims all together in the pond, in this ring of water where we commemorate and we bring them all together for almost for eternity. And then this building of the nightclub is left quite intact, but we create this passage through, which is a place to activate all the senses through the light coming through a place of intimacy, a place where you can just cross, or you don't want to cross, or you can stay there. It's really a free way to use the space. It is a place for us, for a place of consciousness. We want it to be open to light, open to the sky, to see forward. But also, we, as architects, we leave really the freedom to people to do whatever they like into it. And then it is also a place that is a place of gathering. We wanted this place to live again, to be able to host also fraternity, a new place for gathering by creating a kind of an amphitheater in the garden where new events can occur or happen. Also, since day one after the attack, there was a start of testimonies. People came to the site, and we wanted to keep somehow the habits of the victim, of the families that were coming there and had this very natural instinct of leaving flowers or leaving objects. So we created a wall of memory that will be there. And the second aspect of the project, I will leave it to Zoltan to present, is what we call the Uban Connection. From there, what do we do? What do we grow?
The idea of the concept of the three pieces, so it grows out of the memorial, which is kind of the heart and the generator of the overall concept. And so the idea that protecting the nightclub and growing this garden and nature coming out then is the threads that connect the different pieces of the project together. And so those three elements, the nature, water, and color, then become kind of placemakers that lead us through the different urban parts of the project, through the Survivors Walk, through the renovations on Colefi Street. And it's this growing of the landscape that then connects these new green axes in the different sites and starts to create the overall project. One of the interesting pieces of this project from the outset was that the foundation decided that they didn't want only a memorial but also a museum, and it's part of the kind of dynamic of the relationship of the event and how it changes over time. And so although something is very shocking, 1 day after, 1 year after, 5 years after, but they realize visiting other places of memory, such as the site of the Oklahoma bombing, that this relationship with an event changes over time, and the museum, which maybe isn't the best word for it, more like a community center or engagement center or learning center, is a way to interact with memory in a different way. And so about telling the story and the facts and how that evolves with the community, the museum kind of plays that role in tandem with the memorial. So the concept of the museum grows out of the idea of the impact, the garden, giving new life after something that happened that was so tragic. And so we have this idea of a green promenade that grows out of the garden of the memorial through the Colefi Street, which is the street on which both sites are located, towards the edge of the district, which is at the interstate, and grows upwards to the sky like a blooming of a new flower. So the idea of creating life and creating something positive out of something that was so negative for the community. The museum is organized vertically, and the idea was also to try to give back as much space to the neighborhood and the community. So although there's the interior exhibit pieces, we try to create a building that gives as much opportunity for plazas or balconies or terraces and landscape to kind of grow up, and that this can really be occupied, and that kind of formalizes itself with a veil which covers the museum and parking all the infrastructure of the museum together, which gives it a kind of unique identity, but also allows us to control the environment in a way that all the public spaces are usable. So Orlando is a very hot and humid climate, and we're providing lots of plazas and terraces, and we want them to be really useful for the community, not just the visitors of the museum, but all of this district that's growing around it. Through all of the year, not just the few months where it's possible. So the museum pushing upwards is also a way to give a kind of signal and gateway into this district. So from the metropolitan scale, from the highway, it's kind of a marker towards the memorial. And so even though they're not on the same site, we kind of perceive them or design them as one kind of link together. So these two pieces are created, and it creates a symbol of the memorial that's just 500 meters away. And so creating the design inside of the museum, memory became kind of a core factor, and the idea, how do we collect these experiences and testimonies and memories and into the museum to create the story. And so we came up with something that was kind of the core of telling the story, which we called the Tower of Memories, which is literally that, a kind of vertical space that traverses the entire museum around which it's organized. And so we have the public spaces that kind of bleed together with the plazas on the ground floor, and this Tower of Memories, which is kind of a collecting device of different pieces of artifacts around which the exhibitions happen, culminating in the kind of garden on the top and the Belvedere. And so gathering and learning and education is really important, and so all of the museum is designed in a way to be very flexible, to host different events for the community. And the idea of senses that starts with the heart of the memorial itself, and this kind of relationship to nature, a relationship to your senses, want to bring it down through the heart of the museum and memory as well. So there's kind of this always this relationship with yourself as a human and the environment, even as we walk through the building. And so that kind of translates into a very open and dynamic museum or center in which dialogue can happen, education can happen, learning, and really something that can evolve over time as well as the relationship with memory and the relationship with the event changes. This place will change and grow together with it. And maybe one of the most unique pieces of the project that we thought of is that the nightclub itself, in which we create a passage, the part of the nightclub that we removed, we wanted to use it to tell the story. And so our idea is to retranspose that into the museum as an artifact itself, and use part of that building to tell the story of what, not just what happened, but what that place was, which was so important for the community. As a safe place and a place of festivities and gathering, and really a place of joy. And so a lot of the goal of the museum and the project in general is to find back that joy and give that back to the community and the people, and not let people forget about it, and not let hate kind of take over what happened. And so culminating in the rooftop and the various outdoor places, which then become part of the whole experience, and hopefully not just for the visitors, but also for the community as well. And I think we can. So the one quick clip about the project to summarize. We'll pass on to Michael. Thank you very much.
Wow. So I'm Michael Strautmanis. I'm going to try to recover here. I'm the Executive Vice President for Civic Engagement at the Obama Foundation, and I think it's an opportunity, obviously, and a privilege to help create a cultural space in the city in which I was born, and I think I'm trying to figure out how we follow that, and luckily, I have the 44th President of the United States.
Everywhere we look, there's history to reflect on, and history to be made. That's what the Obama Presidential Center is all about, honoring the stories of those who brought us to where we are today, and bringing people together to chart an even brighter future. Here on Chicago's South Side, the Obama Presidential Center will offer old friends and new visitors the chance to explore a world-class museum and gather together for celebrations of all kinds. It will add to the vitality of Jackson Park, adding new gardens, a larger playground, and scenic paths for an early morning jog or an afternoon stroll. And it will do all that while creating jobs and driving economic opportunity here in Chicago and enriching the landscape of the South Side that Michelle and I have called home for so long. I like to think of the Obama Presidential Center Museum as a tribute to what happens when ordinary people come together to do extraordinary things. Inside, exhibits will explore the fullness of the American story, from the promise of our founding documents to the movements that challenged us to live up to them. We'll tell the story of the volunteers who powered our campaign toward history, and we'll examine the 8 years of progress, setback, and hope that followed. You'll be able to walk through a full-scale replica of the Oval Office, relive the moments that defined my presidency, experience the impact of our history-making First Lady, and check out a few of her dresses too. And atop the museum, you'll be able to take in some stunning panoramic views of the city we love. We designed the Forum building with a focus on the creativity and imagination that's always defined this city. Here, we'll host programs and leadership trainings that will support and connect the next generation of change makers here in Chicago to those from all around the world. And we'll open the newest branch of the Chicago Public Library, and on the roof, a garden, similar to the one that Michelle planted at the White House, and we'll even have a few beehives for honey. At the center of it all, a public plaza will welcome visitors for live performances and community festivals. A huge green lawn will be open to throw a frisbee or spread out a blanket. And once it turns cold, we'll open up the best sledding hill in the neighborhood. Of course, it wouldn't be the Obama Presidential Center without a place to play some ball. At the Program Athletic and Activity Center, you'll be able to join a pickup game or a dance class. That's the Obama Presidential Center, a place to not only come together to get active, but to take action. It couldn't be more important to us that it's happening right here on the South Side. This is the place Michelle was born and raised. It's where I got my start as a community organizer. It's where we bought our first house, built our family, and took the first steps on a journey that's still taking shape today. It's the place we found our purpose. Now we hope to give something back, because you never know where something that starts on the South Side might lead.
So the smart thing to do is just leave, right, and say thank you. But I don't do that because have to do my job. I think I'm having trouble moving it to the next. Thank you. The opportunity here that's, I think, in front of us is to take the history of a historic presidency and bring it to life. And one of the things that President Obama has insisted is that this is not meant to be a monument to the past, but an opportunity to build towards the future. And so the idea is really to take this story and use it to create inspiration. Inspiration that gets people thinking about their role in society and their ability to chart the course. But we don't want to just give people that inspiration. We have to give them tools to be able to take that inspiration and bring it to life, and then connecting visitors with one another. And if you look at the image on your right, my far left, you'll see the architects, Todd Williams, Billy Chen, working with the great Dina Griffin here in Chicago, and the Michael Van Valkenburg landscape architecture team. They sort of envisioned these four hands coming together when they thought about the towers, four different hands all creating something new, and wanted something that both ennobles people, right? You think about an area like the south side of Chicago that has been overlooked, underinvested in for generations. That community area deserves to be ennobled because of the people who live there, who deserve that, and yet also enabled, right, to give people the tools to move forward. And so the work that's going to be done at the center will be training the next generation of leaders under the belief of the Obama Foundation that civic engagement and new leadership is what's going to solve the challenges of our time. We see Chicago as an incredible laboratory for change and a place where we're going to go deep. This is a city where, and my colleague from the great cities I know will share and believes this, this is a place where you can roll up your sleeves. All the challenges that you'll find any place in the world are here, but the solutions are here as well. And so we hope that this becomes the location for those who want to come and figure out how to get to work and how to get things done. And then, again, once you're inspired, we want to take you and supercharge you into action, connecting you with people in your communities around the United States and around the world. And so being here invited by the Alliance Française is just an incredible opportunity early on in our journey to make that promise real. I think the other thing I'd say is that you can have all the best values in the world. You can talk about humanity, you can talk about inclusion, you can talk about bringing people together. But if you're doing things the same way, you're going to get the same result. And so we're trying to do things differently. And so when it comes to something as simple as careers in construction, which are incredible careers that have been closed for too long, particularly to Black Americans in the United States and Black Chicagoans, we are making a commitment, putting numbers behind that. Half of the construction hours will be done by people in the city. Third will be performed by residents of the South and West Side that have shown and have demonstrated underemployment and unemployment. 10% in the neighborhoods right around the center. A real challenge and a commitment that goes well beyond what others have done. And we're doing it through partnerships by working with people in communities on the ground who have demonstrated that they can help people lift barriers. Many of you may have seen at the groundbreaking of the Presidential Center, President Obama met with a group called the Chicago Women in Trades that are working to bring women into the construction trades. That's not just good for our project. And we want this to be a model so that the next time somebody says, hey, we can't find a diverse workforce, we want people to be able to point to the Obama Center and say, in a phrase that you may hear a couple times if you're there, yes, we can. That doesn't also go for workforce because there is an incredible wealth gap that is in the United States that's in Chicago. And frankly, if you look at around the world, whether it be divisions around race, class, religion, background. There are wealth gaps everywhere. And these gaps continue to be these persistent challenges that create, I think, incredible disruptions in our society. So how do you solve that? Well, one of the things that you need to do is you need to do business with people. And in order to do business with people, if you want to solve this challenge, you got to do it differently. And so we've made a commitment that half of our spending at the center in construction, and we're going to learn lessons from this to bring it into the operations of the center, are done with diverse businesses. Now that means you have to go out, you have to recruit, you have to talk, you have to have conversations, and they're not going to come with the same, because of the historic challenges, they're not going to come with the same tools that other businesses have. So you're going to have to take more risk. But we believe in taking that risk, we're going to achieve the goals of this project, and so we're proud of our work in diversity. Now, you saw the site, and I want to be sure that you understand that part of what we're doing here is we're extending something that's so iconic and special about this city, which is the experience you have on the lakefront represented at the top in downtown Chicago to the south side, creating a museum campus with what is the most, almost the most visited, I believe, first or second most visited museum in the city, the Museum of Science and Industry. But the design is such that this experience right now at the Museum of Science and Industry, people drive in, they go and park underground, then they leave and go about their business. So you'll see a design here that's supposed to give people the feeling of a campus so that they come and stay and walk around and experience it, everything that's happening here. You see the museum. By the way, it was great to see a museum that's a vertical experience, one that ours starts with the story of myself, me, and rises up in an idea of ascension to the story of we. Not the easiest thing in the world to create a vertical experience in a museum, so you all are inspiring me with what you're doing with Pulse. But you see that there's this idea that we want to take the neighborhood and the community and open it up. So when you come here, we want you to experience the center, but we also want you to experience the neighborhood. We take our environmental responsibilities incredibly seriously. You may have heard President Obama recently at Glasgow, Scotland, speaking about the challenges and the opportunities faced and the urgency around climate change. We're bringing that into the center. We are pursuing the highest level goals for environmental sustainability. And again, this is a neighborhood, if you think about the impacts of climate change, they are often disproportionately felt in communities of color. And so we are making a statement in saying that this building in this neighborhood, in this community, deserves and will have the highest standards of sustainability. We also think that it's important to continue the president's commitment that he had in his administration to inclusive design, which means we have to go out of our way to make sure that people of all abilities, with physical, intellectual, and other disabilities and abilities, are able to come and experience this together. We don't want to have families broken up because somebody happens to be in a wheelchair. We don't want to have people with different levels of sensitivity having to not be able to experience these things together. Inclusive design is an important value for us, and we're working hard to bring it to life. I think we're excited about the opportunity to create social infrastructure, bringing people from all different walks of life together to mix with each other, to bump into each other. And so we'll see students, local families. We hope that people actually become members and sign up to become members of the Obama Center. We'll be training change makers, and we'll have visitors from across the city, across the country, and across the world, all coming together, visiting a library, walking together in the plaza and experiencing the museum. I'm going to skip this because we've had enough videos. And just describe a little bit about what we'll see, and then I'll wrap up. If you look at the top, you'll see letters there. We've actually announced that those letters will come from President Obama's speech in the 50th anniversary of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a seminal moment in our country's history around civil rights and race. We're standing here on Veterans Day, and so the people in this community are descendants of, in part, those who went from the United States, Black Americans, who went to France in World War I in segregated units, experienced something different, and came back and were unwilling to accept the level of degradation that they experienced in the past, sparked incredible violence, a riot in Chicago at the time. We are in that community, we are in that neighborhood. That history is living, it's felt in our bones. For me, as a Black American, it's part of my DNA. And so I think that trauma and that healing and that growth is something that we want to be able to tell that story here in a way that is a source of inspiration, because we are here today and we've been able to make progress on this and so many other issues. The artifacts will be there, and yes, we will be able to see so much of the work of President and Mrs. Obama, but again, all designed towards inspiring people for the future, tangible experience for young people, getting them to understand their role in civic life, that they're part of this journey and part of this fabric, a sense of not only your rights as a citizen, but also your responsibilities to continue the journey around civic engagement. We want to create an entire digital experience. We hope you come to Chicago and visit, but if you don't, you will be able to experience digitally everything that's happening at the center. And we want to create a connection point for our visitors with other visitors and change makers from literally around the world. And so our hope is that people are part of this network. Let's say there's a young leader in Mumbai that you happen to be working, that someone happens to be working on some project, maybe creating urban gardens and creating more accessible food. We hope that they inspire someone. They're talking about themselves as part of this Obama network, and their neighbor comes and happens to want to come and visit to Chicago and see the Obama Presidential Center, and they are talking to someone afterwards, and they get inspired after seeing something about food deserts, and they come to the garden, Mrs. Obama's garden. Well, what do I do? Well, you know what? Go back home, because there's a leader right there who's part of our network, who's ready to work with you and get you engaged in the game on the issues that you care about. And so that's what this is all going to be about. The parkland is so important to us. And so you'll see that besides the museum building, we have rolled park on top of the forum. We have a lovely, because it gets a little cold in Chicago, winter garden experience that connects the entire presidential center at one level below grade that's with light, and one that is accessible. We will be able to give young people the tools, digital tools and a media suite. The branch of the Chicago Public Library, I think, is a critical element of social infrastructure, something that will bring people of all ages and backgrounds into this space, and will, I think, disrupt the sense of some of these presidential experiences. We don't want this to be an elite experience that's only there for the privileged few. We want this to be someplace where everybody comes and everybody feels welcome. Experiencing the fruit and vegetable garden. Actually, just one last point on this. Mrs. Obama said when she grew up in this neighborhood, there was no place to go sledding. I just want you to understand the sense of the lack of infrastructure that our neighbors live with, and that's accepted and acceptable. And so they are committed to bringing this investment to part of the community that has given them so much. And so I think that it is as I said, it's an incredible privilege to be able to do this. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Leslie is we have this has all come about through 5 years of civic engagement. I came here 5 years ago. We just broke ground a few months ago and started having conversations with neighbors, with stakeholders, with donors, with Obama alumni like our good friend Daniel Dozier here, with obviously President and Mrs. Obama, design experts, et cetera. And those conversations were challenging. I looked at the network around Pulse. I'm sure When you came and talked to people who were there, they had very strong feelings, hopes and fears. But I think that what I think design can do is give people the experience of bringing their hopes and dreams into a topic that they care deeply about, and then come out of it with a physical manifestation of what we can all do together. And it happens all the time, and we don't talk about it enough. I believe we're in a battle right now between democracy, civic engagement on one side, and tribalism on another. And the forces of tribalism are loud, and they have a lot of tools. I think we all, through this project and through other projects, need to stand on the side of civic engagement, democracy, and community. We need to own that. We need to tell the story about it, and the stories about how we've gone from tragedy, from challenge to triumph is critical, because that fear can be used and is being used today to divide us. And so we want to use that story to bring us together. And with that, I'll take my seat.
Awesome, thank you. And you guys are hard acts to follow here. This is a really exciting time to be a designer and be an architect. My name is Leslie Roth. I'm a principal at Lamar Johnson Collaborative. I'm an architect and urban designer. You've just seen two absolutely amazing projects that look at the power of public engagement, civic engagement, and architect designer as conveners. So I wanted to take you through very quickly, because I know you're ready for the wine and cheese after this, a few projects that we're working on that are also related to this collective response, and how, as an architect and a designer, working with community, we come to these solutions that are a collective response, where we are facilitators of community building capacity and finding a shared language that brings us all together. The first one that you're seeing here is a collection of images from the City of Chicago citywide plan. We're engaged, this is year 2 of a 4-year process. I was the project manager for the first phase in designing a process that created a public engagement process that was different than what the city has had before. This is the first time that the City of Chicago decided to embark on a citywide plan in over a generation. And as you know, Chicago has seen some stuff, man, in the last, since its history. So working with the city to create a process that really brought shared vision and values to Chicago communities, all Chicago communities, and gave voice to those communities to begin to understand what that collective response looked like. We're seeing this through the lens of historic reckoning and spending a lot of time educating both Chicago residents as well as decision makers and leaders and stakeholders throughout the city on what that means and what that looks like. How lived experience of Chicago residents has really impacted the shape of our communities. We're also looking at health racial equity index assessment, which looks at crime, safety, other regulatory disparity as a public health issue, and reframing the conversation around what our city needs to look like at the end of this process. So part of this is done with a public campaign. You can see the website here. You're free to check out the website as we move through this process. The other big difference between this process and other planning processes that you might have seen is that the level of transparency and the level of accountability that is being held by city officials, department heads, and residents themselves to create the goals and strategies that will then be carried forward to implementation. Little bit of a scale shift here. We're going to look at another project that also embodies capacity building and a cultural response to need in the Austin neighborhood on the west side of the city. Some of you may know Austin is a primarily African-American neighborhood, has suffered, as Michael eloquently put, lots and lots of disinvestment, has not received their fair share of the bounty that the city has shown other neighborhoods. And so the residents of this community took that into their own hands and created a public realm improvement that embodies the cultural identity and character of the community. This is a real symbol of hope. It's a symbol of economic development. And more than anything, it's a symbol of what is important to this community and what they want to communicate to residents that visit, that come play a game of pickup, that come to a jazz event, and that helped actually create this with their own hands. And lastly, another bit of a scale shift. This is Michigan Avenue. Many of you have walked down it. Many of you have shopped on it. What we are doing with the Magnificent Mile Association is looking at a design process that reimagines Michigan Avenue, that looks at emerging technologies, that looks at the reinvention of what does the future mean. And particularly coming out of the pandemic, all of us have been significantly impacted by what that change looks like when we go to the grocery store, or when we take an Uber, or when we walk down the street, and even how we greet our neighbors. And so looking at the Magnificent Mile and being able to understand what these emerging technologies mean and how the memory of what Michigan Avenue used to be and what it could be come together in an urban design and urban planning strategy. Thank you.
So we will open the question time. So if we have any questions or comments from the audience. Yeah. Yes.
I'd just like to know, where is the funding coming for the Pulse project? Who is paying for that?
Yeah, so from our part, the design part, we're not like directly involved in all of it, but it's a kind of mix. But a majority of it is coming from private donation, I believe. So there's certain pieces that are coming either from so they got I think it was last year, President Biden recognized the memorial as a national memorial. So through that status, there's some mechanisms. There's also Orlando, so city and state and national, different mechanisms, but a large part is coming from private donations. And there's actually a fundraising campaign as well. So all of that's on the website. We didn't really talk about it, but yeah.
Thank you very much for these presentations. It was really incredible. And I'm wondering about the Orlando project. At what point in the design process have you been involved with the community, especially the LGBTQ community, and how does that kind of influence your design?
Actually, it did start from day one. During the competition process, the One Pulse Foundation decided to organize an exhibition before selecting the final winner of the competition to address the public capacity to critique or to give their opinion. And it was already the start of. It was part of the jury criteria, and they made their decision based also on the public observations. And then after we won the competition scheme and the early design sketches, we were invited to do community engagement trips or meetings with all the different communities. So we had like 3 presentations per day, meeting everyone, every communities, in order also to collect, to listen, and then eventually to infuse our future process of design with those remarks and those comments that we received.
Maybe just one thing to add is actually even before the design project started, the foundation already had begun even to conclude with the idea to make a memorial and a museum. There was already a series of community engagement with those communities that we were not yet involved with. So I think it's been strong in the Orlando community from the beginning. It
actually also means that the choice of the project was partly made by the different communities, and that's what we've presented to you tonight is the early stage of design, and eventually we're going to implement new ideas and new comments from the communities in the future stages of design.
Your project is absolutely stunning. Let me just start by saying that. The Pulse nightclub, like it was like a gay nightclub, and when you talk about the project, you say community. You never say gay or LGBT, and I was wondering if it's like because it's architecture, it's like bigger than LGBT for you, or if it's like I don't know, maybe you're just like a language piece like they're missing. No.
Tu seras plus à l'aise avec les mots pour moi que moi.
Yeah, I think maybe part of it is a language thing, part of it is an architecture thing. I mean, also, I mean, we're involved in this process with everyone, but we're not sociologists, for example. So we are there to listen, but that's not our expertise, for example. So, of course, it was a gay nightclub, but not only a gay nightclub. It was, I think, Latin night when this happened. So there's the gay community, there's the Hispanic community, and so there's a lot of different. And when we do the community engagement, for example, then it also touches the cultural community because there's the different museums and pieces of Orlando. And so it's really diverse and complex, and we actually don't master all of those pieces. So we're there kind of to, like the diagram showed, you know, we're working together with many people around the foundation and their initiatives to help bring that to life. So maybe that's, I hope that partially answers your observation.
Since the microphone is right here, I wanted to say Veterans Day, I saw a program on YouTube that talked about Dunkirk and the role that the French army played in saving the British forces and allowing them to escape. I think there were only about 30,000 versus 80,000 Germans, and they held them off for 10 days in order for that to happen. And I don't think it gets enough recognition. And there were lots of bravery that was exhibited during that time.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a comment for Orlando and a question for Obama. My comment is I never thought I would have another reason to go back to Orlando after doing the obligatory trip with my children. And thank you for giving me a reason now to return to Orlando.
We're doing that next month, by the way. So.
My question for the Obama Center. One of your slides indicated that one can become a member of the center. I want to be a charter member. Can I do it already? Is it too early?
No, it's not too early. So you definitely can become a charter member, and we do not have anything for you yet if you become a charter member, but we will.
The future is all I care about.
Okay.
You're already there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Obama.org. We got you.
Okay. Thank you.
Just wondering if all of the services and programming at the Obama Center will be free.
Good question. So she asked if all the programming and services of the Obama Center will be free. Yes, but the museum, which is the one building that will, and we had a lot of slides, but you'll be able to go in. That's where the exhibitions that are part of the sort of traditional, if you've ever been to a presidential museum, that you'll go in, the Oval Office, that will be a ticketed experience, and it will have, just like all the rest of the Chicago museums, free days and students and seniors and the like. But it will be a ticketed experience. It will not be free. But you'll be able to be in every other part of the other three buildings and every other part of the campus will be accessible. And it was really important that that was an incredibly important part of the process of getting the permission from the citizens of the city to be able to build this in a public park that today is accessible to anyone who wants to be there. It was really important that we didn't create some barrier to this park. And so everything will be free and accessible, but you will need to get a ticket for the museum, and I hope it's there before you become a senior citizen. Just so.
Is the president available to place a ball?
You know, interestingly enough, I know this is being recorded. I think I'm quite comfortable. I think I'm very comfortable in saying this. I believe, and he has said this, I think publicly, but he certainly said this, his basketball days are over.
I don't know if I believe that.
But, luckily, mine are not. And so I've claimed 2 roles at the Obama Center if I don't lose my job before the thing opens. One will be, and saying something like this could risk it. One is that I will manage the pickup game, which, by the way, I did during the first term of the Obama White House. It was a very democratic process. As long as they were nice to me. And the second thing is I will want to schedule the first sort of film festival at the Obama Center because I'm a film geek. And so maybe we'll do that in partnership at one point with the Alliance. It's kind of.
I think there's some question in the back and the microphone is there. So let's start. Okay, thank you.
So a question for both of you, for both projects. What's the timeline basically? Like when is it opening up the Obama Center and the Pulse, or like an estimate? And it's a sign of my impatience.
No, not at all. We are at about 3 years and I think 10 months now. Not that I'm counting.
Yeah, the Pulse project was actually originally scheduled to open in 2 phases. So the first part would be the memorial, which was going to be 2022 at the anniversary in June, and then the museum in 2024. But since COVID, it's kind of slipped a little bit, and I don't really have any new information about it. But that was the original idea. Yeah.
You have a question. Okay, someone in the back, and then we'll come to the front.
Yeah. Hi. So this is about the Obama Library. So why was Jackson Park chosen instead of the site near 53rd Street, near Washington Park? And also, I thought the women's garden in Jackson Park was not going to be touched, but I noticed it was.
Yeah.
And I was kind of sad to see all the trees removed.
Yeah.
The old trees. So,
Yeah, of course.
You know,
yeah,
thank you.
Not at all. So for those of you who don't know, when President and Mrs. Obama decided they wanted to do this, they basically put out an RFP and said, here's what we'd like to create. Does anybody want us to create it in their neighborhood, in their community? And there were many cities that presented opportunities, and there were many universities that took the step of gathering potential sites and potential projects in relation and in partnership with mayor's offices with cities. At the time, the modern tradition was that, if you look at the Bush libraries in particular, they are very connected and they're actually on the campus of universities. And so that was the idea at first. As the project evolved, it became, frankly, if you can see it now, it's much more than something that could be encompassed within a particular university. And so the Obama Foundation really became its own entity. And I think that, what I'd say is that the project and the location in Jackson Park offers a few things. It offers access to the lake. And I talked about that importance of the lake to Chicago and how too much of, and even tourist maps, if you visit here, often stop at about McCormick Place. And I think continuing that on is important. Secondly, as you know, Mrs. Obama grew up here. President and Mrs. Obama raised their family here. And I think there was a sense, an idea, once that was presented, it captured their imagination. And then the last thing is, I think the intention is, and they've made this commitment, is that you can start east and emanate west. And so we've been in partnership from the beginning with all of the communities in and around the South Side, and an organization was created called Emerald South that, for those who care about Washington Park, they would love your help, because they are trying to bring economic development to the neighborhood, something that has not happened in generations. And so the hope is that that organization, which is an organization that is a grassroots organization but has participation from all different parts of the city, is coming to take the energy in for those who really want to support Washington Park. We'll do that. Yes, we cut down trees to create this. There will be more trees planted. We have an entire study that's on our website that shows the trees that were diseased, that were dying, and there was a lack of biodiversity there. The Women's Garden is a glorious space. We did not say we wouldn't touch it. We would say we would replace it and that we would enhance it. It actually was not the most physically accessible space there, and so we're excited when the Women's Garden comes back that it'll be a place that everyone can come and visit. And I think the last thing I'd say is I love the care and attention from those who know that neighborhood and that community. I think the thing that I would ask for everyone who is paying attention, I want to see that level of intentionality. I didn't necessarily see it before we started this project. When we started the project, a lot of people showed up. I hope that the energy around economic development, around enhancing and doing things for the community is there throughout as we bring $1 billion of investment to the neighborhood, which will have its own consequences, and we're going to need partners to make sure that that doesn't turn into its own set of negative implications for the neighborhood. So I have a lot to say on this, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you. I have a question about, you mentioned the tribalism versus civic engagement, and whether you could all three speak to how you think architecture can do more to help convene communities so that we can be better actors in our own futures and avoid the tribalism.
Can I think I said something on this already. Mm-hmm. You, I know, think about, and you are also spending a lot of time on the question, so I would just, if you have a microphone over there and want to share, please feel free. I want to make sure we bring you into the conversation, particularly since you're an academic, because I just talk. So you might actually have some facts for us on this subject. I'm not trying to pass the buck.
I'll give you a few comments, because this is something that we encounter regularly and is, a very difficult and very difficult issue, especially in public and civic engagement. When we do a lot of public engagement, many times we start with a baseline. Where are you coming from today? And there are also a number of tools that we use to help kind of get a foundational kind of understanding of trust from the people that are gathered or convened to work on a project together. So that's, part of the role that we play as, facilitator, educator in architecture and urban design. The other piece that I think is really powerful is beginning to create a shared language together. And those, to be able to do that, language has rules, right? So that's the other piece, is working on what those rules are together, so everybody enters the conversation with the same baseline of understanding about not only the subject matter, and not only how we're going to treat each other, but what the values are that we're going to put forward in the language that we create together. This happens frequently in the meetings that we have with over 400 Chicagoans that are working actively on the 7 pillars of the citywide plan and working together to create goals and objectives. These were, anyone in the city of Chicago could apply to be a part of this process, and we meet on a regular basis. The first 4 meetings that we've had were establishing that baseline. Where did people come from? What was their lived experience? Honoring their level of knowledge, and also creating a baseline on the access to resources and how we were going to engage with this process and engage with the city to make sure that all of the needs of Chicagoans were met. Chicago is an extremely diverse population. And there is some of that, there are challenges with, even in the environment pillar, we talk a lot about environmental justice. And there are folks that are on one side of it and folks that are like, this doesn't affect my neighborhood. Why do we need to be talking about it? And so helping understand, creating that baseline of, what does, the value of lived experience, and that just because it wasn't you, it impacts all of us, and defining what community means has been, and creating that shared language has been incredibly valuable to moving that process forward.
So maybe we'll move to the conclusions and comments by Teresa. Yeah.
That's as far as it goes. Yeah.
No, I think this is good, right? You can hear me, right? Okie doke. So I need to stand so I can look at my notes, and I needed my glasses so I can try to read my handwriting. So I think we all agree this has just been really fabulous, and very, very exciting, and also somewhat thought-provoking. So I want to begin first with some comments around the title, Sense, Memory, and Architecture. So it's really exciting the way in which, for example, I think with the project, for example, the Pulse project, but I just think your overall orientation, it's like memory through universal sensations. It's like, what an interesting idea, right? That trying to tap into these universal sensations is part of that creation of that memory. And the idea then is that transforming that memory also into public space. And I think that's a powerful part of this. But I think one of the things, if I can reflect first even on the changing role of architecture that I've sensed, right? Because when we often think about architecture, especially when we look at sort of late modern architecture, a lot of emphasis on sort of, big D design and the sort of the grand architect and the sort of the grand result. And part of what we're seeing here is sort of architecture at a different scale, where there's much more of a commitment to the human scale and a much more of a commitment to that interaction with sort of what does this mean to the humans that are experiencing it. So I think that's really an important point to make in highlighting some of what makes this, I think, so powerful and so path-breaking. So groundbreaking. And even this idea, Leslie, that you mentioned around architect as convener. It's like, I was in a school of architecture and planning, and we were always trying to get the architects to think about the public engagement piece and about sort of convening and starting with that piece of it. And to now, so I think of urban planner as, community-based planner as convener. And here we're talking about architect as convener. That's a big leap. And I think it's really fantastic, right? That the role now that architects are seeing in themselves and the roles that they can play in bringing to their projects not only the human scale, but the emotions of humans. And then the way all of you spoke about community, right? And how important that community piece of it was. So it's not just public engagement for the sake of public engagement, but it's public engagement for the sake of creating something, right? And I don't want to forget to say this, I really think it's so significant the way you're carving out a space for the families. It's like, wow, I was really blown away when you said that, And it's like to have this space because you had like the ledges on there and stuff. And especially because, as you point out, so many of them, or somehow that they were Latino, right? But bringing out also who these 49 were, right? And so enhancing their community, but bringing that back to who they were to their families. And to be able to leave, so that it's almost like the families now have this shared space with the public. People from Chicago who are going to travel back to Orlando to go experience this, not just to see it, but to experience it. And so then you also talked about how moving the role of moving this grief, right? And sort of dealing with the grief and moving it to a place almost of sacredness, as I think is what you said, right? So that by creating even that family space, you're connecting the grief of the families, the grief of a community. We're all coming together to grieve with them, to celebrate the lives, right, of these folks, and where they can leave things behind, you know, where they can come and they can pray. I just think that's so profound, so powerful, and so profound. And I've never quite seen that kind of sensitivity expressed, right, by the architect. So I'm that's just like right there alone is just really big, huge kudos. And I think, you know, you also, I think, in talking about the Obama, talked about also about the experience, you know, the weaving of the experience, right? So that's where the sense, right, gets connected to the architecture. Something else that I think is important that you all brought out too is the idea of the experience of the vertical. And so, you know, there's a real kind of harshness of vertical structures very often. You know, they're very like there's just that kind of a harshness about them. And I think you've really softened them, you know, particularly by introducing the green into it, which is really important when we think about, you know, about the blurring of the boundaries between the natural and the built environment. So I really love the way you've integrated the green into this verticality. And you've really transformed, I think, even our concepts of verticality. So I loved that, right? And you also talked about moving through, starting at the bottom you begin with the me, and then you transform that to a we, right? And I thought, you know, that was really powerful. And Leslie, too, when you talked about the shared language and how powerful the shared language is, you know, so again, that creating that we, and how important. I mean, I loved your question, right? How important that we're thinking about the we, and that architects are moving away from just the I, grand architect, to how do we use our power as architects to build a sense of the we. You know, and you said many times, you talked about community and communal, you used the word communal, right? Which I think was really important also about you all's design, right? But it's very conscious, right? And very conscious effort on your part, which I think is so needed in this time. Because part of I think where the tribalism is coming in, it's driven by a disconnection from a we. And it's almost like there's a desire to hold on to this, right? So to some kind of form of connection, this sort of alienation. So I think there's a lot of powerful elements there in what you all have done. The other thing, changing gears, I'm going to look at my notes here in a second, but changing gears a little bit, I also wanted to take note of all three of you of how you've used new technologies and visual representation. It's like, you know, I'm familiar with a lot, but I saw a lot of stuff I hadn't seen. I'm like, oh man, what software did y'all use on that one, right? But and I think there's a lot of new possibilities now with technologies that weren't there before in the digital expressions. And I think what that enables is a better representation of these concepts that you're trying to convey. So I found that really powerful. So I know that I think I'm the last one holding this between the wine and the cheese. So let me just see if there's anything I wanted to be sure that when I get home I don't say, oh man, you forgot to mention. You talked about the relationship to memory. I thought was really powerful. And the idea that the place will change and memory will change, and that memory and place will change together. I thought that was I thought really cool, because what you also then said was in that relationship between memory and place, you create a story, right? So the power of the story, and which again, I think back to your question in the back here, part of the power of the story is the story of who these young people were, right? And I think that should not be forgotten, right? Because part of where the hate came from is because of who they were, right? You know, young Latino gay people, right? And that needs to be woven in there as well. That's part of that story. So, because that's the hate we can't tolerate. See, I'm glad I looked at my notes. There's something else you said that I just totally loved, because when we grieve, there's a lot of deep pain, right? And so you talked a lot about the transformation of that pain, and you talked about moving that pain to a place of joy. You know, the nightclub symbolically was a joyful place. People danced, they laughed, they were happy, they were there together in this sort of communal environment. And it's like, how do we regain that joy? I mean, I personally am going to leave money in my will for a nice big party and dance when I go, right? That's what I'm looking for, right? But and maybe I'll visit, right? During make sure there's some good music, right? But this moving us to a place of joy out of our grief, which comes from how you've configured the concepts you've used, but it comes from that communal spirit, right? And you're providing a place for that communal spirit. So I thought that was incredibly powerful. The inclusiveness you talked about, and then I think that's something you said, Michael. Yeah. The history to reflect on the history to be made, right? And I thought that was a very cool concept as well. And then your emphasis on the social infrastructure for the neighborhood, and how can that project, right, and the project of the Obamas, particularly for Michelle, for Mrs. Obama, right, because she grew up in the areas close to that neighborhood. So the idea of the rebuilding social infrastructure, I thought was also important. So I loved it. I mean, it was a night well spent for me. So thank you.
All right. Well, I must say a few thank you before we go. I have un pot, as we say in French, our partner from the French Cultural Service, also called Villa Albertine, as well as the City initiative that makes this program possible, to Coldefy for their contribution to this program. I want to say there's an exhibition in the hall, and it will be open during our business hour for at least 10 days or 2 weeks, I think, until, I don't have the date, I think it's December 5th. And it explained the project in more detail, as well as other project they did. I want to say thank you to Clayco. I want to say thank you to our panelists, Michael, Zoltan, Thomas, Leslie, and to Teresa for the wrap-up, which is always so brilliant, because then we remember things better when they said twice, don't we? To Nicolas and Axel, of course, we're very honored to have Yannick with us tonight. One word, Boa Light Studio, Philippe Stanfield Pinel is here, and his beautiful urban buffet, the billboard-sized sculpture on our roof. We'll have to come down a little earlier because we have a problem with heating in this building, and they need to do stuff on the roof. So take a good look at it. I will just say, if you have time when we get out, cross the street, go up the parking lot, across the street, go on the 3rd floor, have a look, because it's so beautiful. It's light, and we really enjoyed so much working with Philippe and Boa Light Studio. I also want to say, finally, that on December 8th, we have our last program, partner program with the Chicago Architecture Biennial, when we welcome a conversation between David Brown and the French architect Christophe Hutin, who will present his movie Communities at Work. And we also will open our last exhibition, which is called AFEX. AFEX means Architecte Français à l'Export. So highlighting the project of architecture from French projects abroad. I think it's time I start speaking French. I will stop now. So, merci also and mainly to you for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And now let's go on the other side to keep that conversation going. Merci.